Hello and welcome to today's webinar, How to Visualize the Entire Kill Chain and Kiss Alert Fatigue Goodbye. My name is Bill Gardner. I'm the Director of Technical Marketing at Awake, and I'm joined by Fraser Kine, Awake Senior Customer Engineer for EMEA. Today we'll be seeing how the Awake Security Platform enables customers to gain complete visibility and advanced detection, analysis, and response capabilities across the entire cyber kill chain. In the interest of time, we'll be taking a few questions at the end of the session, so please type in any questions after the presentation and we'll try and get the answers for you. Awake Security's leading edge approach to advanced security has been validated by numerous customers, analysts, and industry experts. We'll take a couple of minutes to examine the latest challenges facing security teams and how the Awake platform addresses these problems. Fraser will then demonstrate how Awake's advanced attack analysis capabilities are revolutionizing the way security pros find, analyze, and respond to these challenges. Networks and the way people use them have been evolving at a breathtaking pace. These changes have produced new challenges for those of us tasked with protecting them. First, more than 50% of devices using the network are now unmanaged. Examples include employee-owned smartphones, tablets, and laptops, as well as IoT and OT systems. Recent studies have shown that more than 50% of attacks no longer use malware. These new techniques bypass traditional controls like antivirus and intrusion prevention systems. And more than 70% of today's attack traffic is encrypted, causing even more challenges to legacy defenses that rely on content inspection or endpoint agents to detect threats. So what's the impact of these challenges? Well, higher security operations costs, a greater impact from every incident due to the higher dwell time of the attacker in the network, and finally, a high risk of missed attacks. So let's examine how Awake's platform delivers true attack analysis rather than a flood of cryptic alerts. First step is to gather your data. Awake has developed a proprietary engine, Entity IQ, which automatically monitors and analyzes all packets from all devices on the network core, hybrid cloud segments, and distributed locations. Entity IQ tracks, profiles, and analyzes every individual device, providing an integrated record of all activities for further analysis. Second is to define the tactics, techniques, and procedures used by attackers. Awake's adversarial models are based on a unique proprietary language which enables detection of malicious intent, not on specific indicators of compromise or signatures of specific artifacts. And finally, Awake's AVA, a cloud-based AI system, integrates, correlates, and automatically provides the rich attack analysis needed to quickly validate and remediate any threats. So in summary, Awake takes your security operations to a whole new level by providing fully automated, transparent analysis, visibility, and even remediation of the most advanced threats across the kill chain and across the entire attack surface of the organization. So let's turn it over to Fraser for a demonstration of the Awake Security Platform.
So let's take a look at the actual platform and how we gather, analyze, and hunt. So first thing we're looking at in the Awake platform is the platform dashboard. And here's where you get all the information that you need at your fingertips as an analyst to find out what you need to know. There's a few different dashboards we produce for you automatically. So that includes the risk dashboard, what's actually should be highlighted for you at the moment, or things that may be of interest for you to investigate. And then the system dashboard tells you how the system's operating. But the really cool thing about these dashboards is they're personalizable. You can create your own. So we're in the process here of building this SOC dashboard out to facilitate the exact things that the SOC team want to focus on. So in each one of these 4 quadrants, we can pick the data that we want. So for example, here we've got create a new visualization, and we can select what it is we want to see and what it is we want to focus on. Or we could actually have multiple of these showing, but showing for different time periods if you wanted to spot trends or analyze like that. Let's focus on just one of these at the moment though. We're going to have a look at the devices by risk. And if I want to analyze this further, I can actually maximize this on the screen so I get more real estate. So you can see here, we've got a sunburst diagram that enables us to see the risk visually and build it out for ourselves. So this is being shown at the moment to have the information that we want to show on both the medium and high risk devices, and we can play with what sort of format we want to show this in. And as I work from the center outwards, if I select, for example, the medium risk devices, it'll then say at the bottom, well, that's medium risk, and then it will show me the operating systems within that at the next concentric ring. So I can look at iOS devices, it's showing at the bottom there, or Linux devices, and Apple, and so on. And as we move further around the ring, we can then select the specific subsections of each of these and focus on any of them. And as we're doing that, the contextual information we pick up will be relevantly shown here, so we can then have a pivot point off to the data that we want. So if, for example, I wanted to pick high-risk devices, I could select those, and then I can simply click in the UI here to take me into the specific device. And this is where we start to expose entity IQ and the device profiles. One of the key things that Awake wanted to do in gathering and analyzing information is to provide context. So what we do with entity IQ is both for devices and for domains. We use information that we get from the network, from our sensors, which are just passively listening and they're analyzing layers 2 through to 7 and doing deep packet inspection and analyzing over 3,000 protocols to just say passively off the network, how can we identify the devices and give them business meaningful context? So you can see the device we've named here, and we've also put at the front the username which is most associated and commonly used with that device. So that over time, when we expose risks and areas that you want to investigate, we can tell you it was this device that was doing it, rather than just something arbitrary like an IP address. So as we look through the details here, we can see that it was a Windows device, it was Windows 10, we can see when it was first and last on the network. Critically, we can see all of the IP addresses it's used, because in many situations, IP addresses are ephemeral, and if users are moving around the network and taking their devices with them, they could pop up in different VLANs and so on. So being able to track exactly where the device has been and not just looking at something arbitrary like an IP address, which you then have to try and cross-correlate to find some meaning from, we can do all of that for you so that in the future, if you wanted to, for example, to grab a PCAP from this and pull the data from the sensors to get a full network trace of everything that was happening at that time, rather than just the metadata and stuff that we're showing you within the UI, you can do that. And we will also bring together all the IP addresses that were used into a single PCAP. And that's really useful for an analysis perspective. We go on to show further details around things like the administrator is another user who's been on this device. So we can list all the users that have been on here. And then we can also look at things like similar devices, which I'll come to in a moment. The key thing about this and how we're doing it is through something called fingerprints. So these fingerprints are characteristic artifacts of what a device does when it's on the network, all of the communications it makes. And then by using data science and collaborating and pulling all this information together, we can start to identify all these specific device characteristic artifacts. And this is similar to how we identify human beings that we interact with by hair color, height, whether you wear glasses, so on and so forth. We recognize each other. It's the same thing on the network. So if a device goes off the network for a long period and then comes back on, which of course is happening a lot at the moment with the coronavirus situation, then we're even able to recognize that device again and continue with that context. And part of identifying what makes something individual also then ties to what other similar devices are like it on the network. So if we identify that we have this particular device, what else is like it? What's its peer group? What other devices operate in a similar fashion? And this again is really important to understand because it's again about context. By way of another analogy, if someone's playing soccer, is that a bad thing? Well, we don't really know, but if they often play soccer and their peer group often plays soccer, maybe the importance of them playing soccer is different based on that. However, if all of a sudden they play ice hockey, that's a completely different thing. So soccer isn't bad necessarily, ice hockey isn't bad necessarily, but the context of someone doing something unusual, which is outside of their normal operation, in context to everything else, is extremely important. And this helps drive the threats and how we can bubble up the right information to the analyst. As we move further down, we can also start to show integrations with other products. Our customers, of course, have a number of different technologies they want to use. And in this instance, we're showing specifically an EDR tool. In this case, it's Sentinel-1, could be many others. And we're pulling information from the Sentinel-1 system into our interface here. So the analyst has everything they need at their fingertips, but can also then pivot off and go and have a look into that platform should they need to do further analysis. And we're also showing all the protocols that are used on the device. So the idea behind this is just to give you context really at the highest level. So we're gathering all this information to help you analyze. The next step is how can you actually search the network to find the information that you need? Well, here at what Awake have done is developed a vocabulary that enables you to ask your network pretty much any question. So with just your imagination, you can decide, I want to search across this. So anything you type up here in the search screen, for example, if you want to just type something simple like Google, as soon as you start to type, the system will say, well, what do you want to look for? Do you want to look for devices that match this? Do you want to look for emails? In this instance, we want to look for domains. So I click on domains, and then it will list all of the domains that have been used across this. So I could say, for example, I want to look across Google APIs, click the button, and I can see information about the domain. Again, the domain profile under Entity IQ, and all the devices that have connected to it, and the subdomains they've been going to. So everything is available at the analyst's fingertips, and they can pivot from there for anything. But then we actually get into the true vocabulary of what we can do with this platform, and that's with the adversarial modeling language. Now, the adversarial modeling language is this true vocabulary. You can ask the network any questions. And I tend to think of this a little bit like Lego. We have Lego bricks, which are the pure language. Then we have skills and recipes, which are some of those Lego bricks pre-compiled and put together. And then we have adversarial models, which comprise of some Lego bricks, some of the skills and recipes, which are the Lego constructions pre-made. And these are things like Lego houses, Lego spaceships, Lego cars. What I mean by that analogy is it's very easy to build your own, but the really great thing about Awake is that we've pre-computed a lot of these things already for you. And our threat hunters have brought their human experience to bear to create these pre-computed answers and also to curate them over time. So the system's constantly going to be updated. So if you want to search for something on your network, you can get right down to the basic Lego brick level if you want to, but you don't need to do that. You can simply use something called feature summaries and just search across the data. So we tell you, here's all the things that we're finding in the particular time frame that you're searching for. You can then click into here and just simply say, from a list, what do I want to find? Do I want to find Windows devices, or do I want to not find Windows devices? When I search for these, then everything is completely at my fingertips in terms of finding what device went where and did what. And then I can say, well, actually, I want Windows, but I don't want Windows 10. So in the UI, I can just add to the query and not. And without having to understand how the language works, I can simply point and click, select buttons. And then as I search, I can refine what I'm looking for and narrow down my investigations. So hunting is made extremely easy by doing this. But as I mentioned earlier on, the real power here is that a lot of the time, we've already done this for you. So when you start to look, the first thing we're going to show is the adversarial models, which are the pre-computed things that we've already done for you that the system is alerting on. And this will tell you about things that we think are important. And you'll notice the naming is fully aligned here with the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So it's all completely contextual and easy to understand. So we can search through the system for the things that we've found that we think will be directly relevant to you. So this could be all sorts of different information. I'm going to take a look at this first one, which is exfiltration scripted like PowerShell upload. So when we click into this, the system has told us this is potentially worth investigating. So we can see now an explanation of what it is we found and why we think we found it. So there's some descriptions here and documentation about what this particular model is looking for. So without going into this in too much depth, we can see that one device has been found to do this, and it's done this a lot of times, nearly 5,500 times. But the really great thing about Awake also is that everything we do is completely transparent and completely extensible. So when we highlight something to you from an adversarial model, everything we have done has been done with our AML, our adversarial modeling language. And we expose all of that to you so you can see exactly what we've done. So there's no ivory towers here. There's no hidden things. There's no like curtain that you can't peek behind. You can look at everything yourself. You can see how we're doing it. And then you can also edit it, modify it, enhance it, improve it, add specific information from your environment to create your own as you need to, or augment the ones that are already there. So let's have a look at these actual events that we've seen. So now when we come into the workbench, again, we're seeing what device went where and did what. And we're seeing there's some interesting information here about a device called Polycom Boardroom that was actually going off to gmail.com. This was highlighted to us because it was a scripted like PowerShell upload to a cloud service or uncommon destination. This is weird. This wants further investigation. So we can look through everything that happened here and we can correlate this ourselves. But here we move more simply into the next phase, which is how we get all of this into a body of knowledge, how we can fully understand this. And this is where we have something called situations. So what I can simply do within the UI is to select an activity or a particular device or anything else that we can expose through the platform, and we can add it to a situation. Now, this is something we've already done for this particular threat. So we're going to go into the situations now. Situations are a body of knowledge. They are a repository where you can put an investigation that you are going through at the moment to understand all the different components. So everything that we have in the rest of the platform can then be fed into these situations. And I tend to think of these a little bit like an attorney building a case. If you're going to be in court, you want to know what happened, you want to have the proof of what happened, and then you want to know what the impact of that is. And then from an analysis perspective, what are my investigation options and my response options? So we found the information in the UI from a simple adversarial model, which we raised up to you, that there was some anomalous behavior with a particular Polycom device. With further analysis, what we were able to identify was this Polycom IP phone in the executive boardroom had behavior that deviated from all the other Polycom devices on the network. So we automatically found that this was strange behavior. The really interesting thing is not all bad things are anomalies, and not all anomalies are bad things. You need much more context than that. But because we're able to do that with the Awake platform, we can now visualize that process and how everything worked. So if we go into the attack sequence, we start with the attack map at the top, we can see the devices involved. And in this particular instance, we're mapping it out easily for you just by putting this information into this UI that shows that this particular device, the Polycom boardroom device, was behaving in a strange way. As we say here, although Gmail is very common for most devices in most enterprises, with Entity IQ, we've done a characteristic artifact analysis to be able to determine this is a very abnormal for devices like Polycom phones. So we've listed these 4 other devices, which are very similar to this one, that are not behaving in that way, out of probably many thousands of Polycom devices that are potentially across the network. So we can see visually what's going on here. We can see that information is being uploaded to Gmail shortly after the board meeting. And as we start to track through, we can see every step of the attack. And what is quickly revealed to us is what actually was happening was that someone was recording meetings that were going on this particular Polycom phone because it was in the executive boardroom, and then sending information and those recordings up to Gmail so that they could access them later. And that information could have been used for all sorts of bad things. And that was really the risk that the customer had no visibility to until Awake platforms actually exposed that to them. So we can see the supporting artifacts that make up this case. Okay, you believe these things are happening. Why do you believe that? Well, because of all this information that we've gathered through the platform, just by throwing this into a situation and letting the situation build out. That situation can be augmented by humans. You can use it as a documentation source, but it also, a lot of this is automated by Awake to go off and do things like open source intelligence for you to augment and gather all the information that could be useful. So these are the supporting artifacts. This is the proof. What was the impact? Well, it's this particular device that was impacted by this. What is the next stage? Well, the next stage is our investigation options. What do we think should happen next? Well, in this particular instance, we should audit the remote surveillance options on the phone. So we can talk about what are these options? How do they look? Why is this operating? Is this normal? What further research do we need to do to build the case? And then we can audit enterprises for the entire enterprise for any phones with the web services enabled. So we want to make sure that these phones can't communicate and can't be used to send information out that you don't want them to. So these investigation options can be added, the order can be changed, and they can be marked as complete because this is a full workflow. The feedback we got from a lot of customers is typically this kind of information is either in the minds of a specific analyst or at best on pieces of paper or post-it notes on their desk. And this is no way to actually control and manage a workflow. Finally, then we look at response options. What do we want to do about this? And we can then mark these as complete in a sense of workflow, and we keep an audit log of everything that's happened on this particular case. So you can see from beginning to end, this is now a body of knowledge where you can bring together all of the expertise that you've gathered through the platform and present a workflow that anyone can understand and serves as an ongoing documentation of what's happening. So this one is interesting because it covers a number of different topics. It covers IoT, it covers a threat which was not malware based. There was no malware in this, it was malintent. And the third thing it covers is everything in this process was encrypted. This was all encrypted data. And with upwards of 70% of network traffic we're seeing these days being encrypted, the idea that we're going to break that encryption and get inside it all is expensive, time consuming, and is horrible from a privacy perspective. But with Awake and our ability to analyze encrypted traffic, what we were really looking for is not the data within the packets themselves. We were more interested in how it worked, where it was from, where it was going to, what apps were being used. Was it a browser or non-browser TLS traffic? Not so much what it contains. And this actually gives us the meaningful workflow of being able to identify malintent without having to decrypt any of the particular traffic itself. So that's an example of those sorts of things. Going over to another example, here's one which is very different, but shows the power of the platform in different ways. This one is an unregistered Chrome extension. And in this particular case, a single device on the network has been compromised by a drive-by download, and an unregistered Chrome extension has been installed. And then we can see the steps from that unregistered Chrome extension being installed, the C2 traffic to the unknown attacker domain, the credential access that was then possible to the Windows AD server, and then the exfiltration of data based on those compromised credentials out to a third-party site. And again, all of this is documented. The supporting artifacts are all registered and logged. The impact to the system can be monitored of the devices that were potentially impacted, the investigation options, and the response. So you can see in terms of the way that Awake operates, we gather the information passively from the network. We then analyze it by providing context through Entity IQ about the devices and the domains involved. And then you can hunt across this information using adversarial modeling language, which you can either create yourself or you can rely on the fact that those questions have been pre-asked for you by the experts at the back end of Awake who create and curate the pre-computed answers to the most common questions that threat hunters would want to ask. All of it contextually based, all of it just giving you the right information and not overloading people with meaningless alerts, which are completely irrelevant to the system. And this enables us to identify the kind of low and slow activities which typically pass network security by, and also enable us to reveal interesting information that was present on the network long before Awake arrived, and other tools may accidentally baseline as normal, even though they're not. Then when you put all this together with situations, both the stuff that you do yourself and the automation that Awake built in, it really is like having a threat expert on your team who can help you and gather all these things into one place.
Thanks, Fraser. That was a lot of information to cover in such a short time. We still have a couple of minutes left, so let's see if we can answer some questions. The first question we've got is, I've been using a SIM to monitor and find attacks in my network. How is Awake different?
Yeah, it's a good question, Bill. So a SIM can be useful if you've got it set up to monitor enough different device logs and you have enough manpower to then go through and correlate all the different log entries, and you can build a picture up what's happening on the network, and there's some real power in that and some benefits in doing that. However, with the avalanche of data to wade through, feedback we get from people is this can be a very time-consuming process. And that's one of the major parts of why attackers can persist in a network for months, because it just takes so long for the security teams to be able to respond. So they're gathering the data, they've got the data, but it's not just about gathering, it's actually going through the data itself. And in fact, we find some customers really like the search functionality in the Awake platform, that they can get information from a SIM and then immediately go and search for that across the Awake platform and get to the ground truth from the network. Awake works very differently. We don't rely on logs, which is particularly helpful when so many devices today don't generate useful logs. I mean, you may have devices like IoT or OT devices that don't log anything at all, or when the SIM maybe doesn't have access to personal devices being used on the network. So there's a visibility gap often with the SIM. So with Awake, we automate the process of correlating and integrating data for you, and the goal is to reduce the amount of time needed to find and respond to an attacker. Having said that, we of course recognize that we all have a role to play. And if you look at things like the Gartner SOC triad, you'll see that, you know, they have UBA and SIM at the top, they have EDR, and then they have network detection and response. So they've all got a role to play. We just approach our part of that differently.
Awesome, thanks. Let's see, second question here we've got, will I have to write my own awake models before the system can detect anything? And what if I'm not sure what needs to go into a model?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the really most powerful things about Awake is that there isn't a need for you to have to write your own models before the system can detect anything. And the great thing about Awake is it provides a dynamic library of pre-configured models. These are answers to pre-computed questions that our threat hunters have already written. And this allows the system to begin working as soon as it's deployed. So from once you actually put the thing on your network and it starts collecting data, it's immediately going to start providing value, and certainly in short order, without the need also to do some sort of baselining on the network first. It doesn't need to do that. The true power of the modeling language is that it enables an experienced analyst to easily transform their threat hunting skills into models that automate those skills for the benefit of other operators in the organization. So if you've got really highly skilled threat hunters, they can put their expertise directly into the platform and let everyone else benefit, and it can really up-level those people. But if your organization lacks experienced analysts, Awake then offers a managed service which will work directly with your team to make sure you get the full benefits of the technology. So there is incredible sophistication in the platform, but it is entirely optional. You don't need to use it. Now, hopefully you saw in the demo that you can just take the value straight from the platform, but the whole platform is completely transparent and it is completely extensible. You don't have to extend it, but if you want to, you can. So this really is a tool that should, from the adversarial modeling language perspective, be able to be used by a level 1 analyst really easily to upskill them, but also by a top level analyst to really get the most out of the system and augment it in any way they see fit.
Well, awesome. Appreciate that, Fraser. Looks like we're up against our time limits today. So I want to thank you and the audience for your participation and encourage you to reach out to Awake if you would like to see how our technology can benefit your organization. Much more information is available at www.awakesecurity.com, or you can contact us directly at info@awakesecurity.com. Thanks again for attending, and we hope you stay safe.